The courthouse in Jackson County was a grand old building, with marble floors polished smooth by decades of footsteps and tall windows that let in beams of pale light. Inside Courtroom B, the air was thick with anticipation. A major case was underway, a lawsuit involving a car accident, corporate negligence, and millions of dollars at stake. Marcus Reed walked through the double doors quietly, carrying a worn leather folder tucked under his arm. He wasn't dressed like the lawyers or the jury in pressed suits. Instead, he wore clean work clothes, dark slacks and a button-down shirt with faint traces of grease still staining the cuffs, his calloused hands betraying a lifetime under the hood of engines. He knew he stood out. He also knew he didn't need to apologize for it. As Marcus made his way down the aisle toward the front, a few spectators craned their necks, whispering. To them, he looked more like someone who had wandered in off the street than an expert who held the key to the case. "Sir," the bailiff called, holding out a hand, "where do you think you're going?" Marcus kept his tone calm. "To the witness stand. I'm scheduled to testify." Before the bailiff could respond, Judge Horace Whitman peered over his glasses from the bench. He was a stern man with a clipped gray mustache, his robe pressed crisp. His voice cut through the murmurs. "You there. This courtroom is not open for spectators to wander about. Take your seat in the back or leave." Marcus paused, his back straightening. "Your Honor," he said evenly, "I'm not a spectator. I'm—" The judge banged his gavel once, sharp. "I said out. This is a serious proceeding, and we won't tolerate interruptions from whoever you are." A ripple of laughter spread through the gallery, hushed but sharp enough to sting. The defense attorney smirked, leaning back in his chair as if enjoying the scene. Even the prosecutor looked uncertain, shuffling papers nervously. Marcus stood tall, not raising his voice, but not moving either. He had faced harder stares before. Bosses who didn't believe he could fix their engines, customers who doubted a black mechanic's word, inspectors who assumed he cut corners. He knew the look of prejudice when he saw it, and yet he didn't bow to it. His hand tightened on the leather folder. Inside were decades of proof. Certificates, letters, photos of his work, the very reason he had been called here today. The reason this courtroom needed him. But for now, all anyone else saw was just a mechanic being told to get out. The trial was about to learn otherwise. The gavel echoed again, sharp against the wooden bench. Judge Whitman's voice carried authority, but beneath it, an edge of irritation. "I won't repeat myself," he said, his tone clipped. "This courtroom is not a place for distractions. Sir, step outside before you are removed." Marcus remained where he was, shoulders squared, his jaw set but his voice calm. "Your Honor, I am here by request of the court. I am on the witness list." The judge's brows furrowed, his lips curling into impatience. "The witness list is for experts, not spectators, not mechanics." The last word landed like an insult. A ripple of amusement ran through the gallery. A couple of men in the back chuckled under their breath, the sound carrying louder than they intended. At the defense table, Attorney Frank Dalton smirked openly, leaning back in his chair with one arm draped lazily over the rest. "Your Honor," he said smoothly, "if the gentleman wants to help, perhaps he could change the oil on my car after this hearing." Laughter broke out again, harsher this time. Marcus felt the sting of it but didn't flinch. He let the noise pass, his gaze steady, his voice controlled. "I am not here as a spectator, nor as a joke. I am Marcus Reed, ASE certified master mechanic. I've been called by the prosecution to provide testimony on the vehicle in question." The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably, finally rising to his feet. "Your Honor, he is indeed on our list. He inspected the defendant's car personally. His findings are critical to establishing liability." Whitman glanced down at the paperwork on his desk, flipping through a stack as if annoyed by the confirmation. His eyes lifted again, narrowing. "Even so," he said curtly, "this court expects its witnesses to present themselves appropriately. This is a court of law, not a garage." The laughter returned, thinner now but still present. Marcus inhaled slowly, grounding himself. He had worked his whole life for respect. often earning it twice over just to be considered equal. He would not let the robe on the bench or the smirk on the defense attorney's face strip him of the dignity he had brought with him. He spoke firmly, his voice resonating in the hushed chamber. With respect, Your Honor, truth does not wear a suit. The truth lies in the work, and the work is mine. The room fell quieter than before. The prosecutor nodded faintly, emboldened by Marcus's words. The jurors, who had been shifting uncomfortably, now leaned forward, curiosity replacing doubt. But the judge's face remained hard, his pride unwilling to yield. He banged the gavel once more. Enough! If you are who you claim to be, then prove it. Documentation, credentials, right now. Or you will leave this courtroom. Marcus's hand brushed against the folder he carried, the weight of his life's work pressed between worn leather covers. The moment to open it had come. Marcus stood at the center of the courtroom, the weight of 100 eyes pressing down on him. He could feel the murmurs buzzing in the gallery. Half amusement, half curiosity, but his focus remained steady. He had been underestimated too many times to count. This was nothing new. He placed the worn leather folder gently on the railing in front of him. Your Honor, he began, his tone calm but resonant, I was raised to respect this court, just as I respect my work. I didn't walk in here uninvited. I was summoned. The judge frowned, impatient. And yet, you present yourself like this, grease-stained, looking more like a tradesman than an expert. Marcus's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed level. That's because I am a tradesman, Your Honor. A tradesman with 30 years of specialized training, certification, and experience. Cars don't fail because of lawyers in suits. They fail because someone neglected the details. And I am here to testify about those details. A hush spread through the courtroom. The jurors, who had been shifting in their seats, now leaned forward slightly. Even the prosecutor, who had looked uneasy before, straightened with renewed confidence. The defense attorney tried to cut in, his smirk still lingering. Your Honor, this is nothing but a stall tactic. He's not qualified. Marcus turned his gaze to him, unflinching. Qualified? I have torn down and rebuilt engines with my own hands. I've trained apprentices who now run their own shops. I've been called in to consult for manufacturers when their own engineers couldn't find the fault. If that doesn't qualify me to tell you why those brakes failed, then I don't know what does. The words hit with quiet force. The jurors exchanged looks. A murmur of agreement rustled through the gallery. The judge cleared his throat, but his authority felt thinner now, strained. Documentation, he repeated stubbornly, though his voice lacked the same bite. Marcus rested his hand on the folder, the leather worn smooth by years of use. Inside were the papers that bore his name and the proof of every long night, every certification, every recognition. He looked straight at the bench, his voice low but steady. I don't need to prove who I am, Your Honor. But since this court demands it, I will. And with that, Marcus began to open the folder. The courtroom, once filled with laughter, now sat in taut silence. The mechanic they had mocked was about to speak with the authority of an expert. Marcus opened the worn leather folder with the care of a man revealing more than paper, revealing a lifetime. Inside were neatly stacked documents, each page marked with stamps, seals, and signatures. He lifted the first sheet and handed it to the bailiff, who carried it to the bench. ASE Master Certification, Marcus said, his tone steady, earned 20 years ago. Renewed every 5 years since the judge glanced down, lips pursed, but said nothing. Marcus passed the next document. Specialist Certification in Brake Systems from Ford Motor Company. Advanced Diagnostics Recognition from General Motors. Independent Consultant Contracts for Accident Reconstruction, several of which were used in previous court cases in this very state. One by one, the bailiff laid the papers before the judge like pieces of evidence in a trial of truth. The prosecutor rose, his voice clear now, confidence building with every page. Your Honor, Mr. Reed's name is indeed on our witness list. These credentials were filed with the court 2 weeks ago. His testimony is central to proving negligence. The defense attorney shifted in his seat, the smirk fading from his face. He reached for his notes, rifling through them as if he might find some overlooked detail to use against Marcus. Nothing came. Marcus continued, his voice never rising, but carrying to every corner of the courtroom. I've been in this line of work for over 30 years. When an engine dies, I know why. When brakes fail, I can tell you whether it was an accident or neglect. Machines don't lie, Your Honor. People do. And I am here to make sure the truth is heard. The jury leaned forward now, listening as though they were in class with a teacher who finally made sense of a complicated subject. The judge's face had changed. The earlier disdain, the sharp impatience, had dulled into something else. Discomfort. His gavel hand rested motionless. He looked at the papers again, then back at Marcus, his authority caught between pride and shame. The silence stretched. Then, the prosecutor broke it. The court recognizes Marcus Reed as our expert witness. The judge cleared his throat, reluctant but bound. So noted. A ripple moved through the gallery. Surprise, admiration, even a few murmurs of apology from those who had laughed before. Marcus closed the folder gently, the weight of years sliding back into place. He didn't gloat, didn't smile. He simply nodded once, as if to say, "Now, may I do the work I came here to do?" And for the first time that day, the court was ready to listen. Marcus took the stand with a quiet confidence. He didn't rush, didn't glance nervously at the crowd. Instead, he adjusted the microphone, rested his calloused hands on the rail, and nodded once toward the prosecutor. "Mr. Reed," the prosecutor began, his tone steadier than before. "Please explain to the jury what you discovered when you inspected the defendant's vehicle." Marcus leaned forward slightly, speaking clearly, his words simple but precise. The car's braking system was compromised. The pads were worn down to metal. The rotors scored. But that wasn't the main issue. The master cylinder, that's the heart of the braking system, had a leak. Fluid was seeping out slowly, which meant pressure couldn't build. Without pressure, brakes don't stop a car. It's not opinion, it's mechanics. He reached for a diagram laid out beside him, a simple illustration of a brake system. Turning it to face the jury, he traced the lines with a blunt finger. Think of it like blood vessels in the body. If there's a leak, the heart can't push blood where it needs to go. Same with this cylinder. When the driver hit the brakes, nothing reached the wheels. No pressure. No stop. The jurors nodded, murmuring softly, their eyes locked on him. The language wasn't filled with jargon. It was a lesson anyone could understand. Marcus continued, his tone calm but firm. This wasn't an accident waiting to happen. It was an accident guaranteed to happen. Anyone who looked under that hood should have seen it. The fact that it wasn't fixed? That's negligence. Plain and simple. The prosecutor smiled faintly, sensing the weight his witness carried. "Mr. Reed, in your professional opinion, could this accident have been prevented?" Marcus didn't hesitate. Absolutely. A routine inspection, 5 minutes, would have caught the leak. 5 minutes could have saved lives. But it wasn't done. A low ripple moved through the gallery. Even those unfamiliar with cars understood the gravity of his words. The defense attorney shot to his feet, his tone sharp. "Objection, Your Honor! Speculation!" But the judge, who had once dismissed Marcus, now leaned forward, reading the room, the evidence, the unshakable clarity. Overruled. The witness may continue. For the first time, Marcus allowed a small nod of acknowledgement. Not triumph, not spite. Just quiet recognition that the truth had finally taken its seat. And as he turned back to the jury, the weight of the case shifted with him. The defense attorney, Frank Dalton, adjusted his tie and rose slowly, a practiced smile plastered on his face. He approached the witness stand with the air of a man convinced he could out-talk anyone. "Mr. Reed," Dalton began smoothly, pacing before the jury. "You've told us about leaks and cylinders. But let's be honest, you're not an engineer. You don't design cars. Isn't it true that your so-called expertise is really just Tinkering? A ripple of unease passed through the jury box. Dalton had found his rhythm, his tone mocking but confident. Marcus didn't flinch. He looked the attorney square in the eye, his voice steady. I don't tinker, sir. I repair, I diagnose, I restore. And I've done it for longer than you've practiced law. A faint chuckle rolled through the gallery, soft but pointed. Dalton's smile twitched, but he pressed on. Let me put it another way, Dalton said, flipping through his notes. You can't possibly prove that this alleged leak wasn't caused after the crash. Stress, impact, those can damage a cylinder too. Isn't that true? Marcus leaned back slightly, folding his hands. No, and I'll explain why. He gestured toward the evidence photos projected on the screen. If the cylinder had cracked during impact, the edges would be jagged, the brake fresh, the metal bright. But look here. Dark stains around the seal, dust collected along the trail of fluid. That tells us it was leaking for weeks before the crash. Anyone with eyes could see it. The jurors leaned closer, nodding, following his explanation as if it were a simple story. Dalton, meanwhile, shifted uncomfortably. Marcus continued, his voice growing firmer. Machines don't lie. They leave marks, trails, evidence. And this car was crying for help, long before it ever hit the road that day. Whoever was responsible for its care ignored it. Dalton tried once more, his voice rising. So, you expect this jury to take your word, a mechanic in work clothes, over licensed engineers? Marcus didn't miss a beat. I expect them to take the truth. And the truth doesn't care about suits or titles or who laughs the loudest. It's in the steel. It's in the stains. It's right there in front of you. Silence fell heavy across the courtroom. The jurors exchanged glances, not of doubt, but of conviction. Even Judge Whitman, who had once tried to dismiss Marcus from the room, now watched with quiet acknowledgement, the faintest flicker of shame in his eyes. The turning point had come. The courtroom, once filled with ridicule, now bent around the undeniable weight of Marcus's expertise. And for the defense, the road ahead had suddenly narrowed to nothing. The defense attorney sat down hard, his notes scattered, his smirk gone. The jury's faces told the truth he didn't want to see. Marcus Reed had won them over. Not with theatrics, not with charm, but with facts, clarity, and unshakable composure. The prosecutor rose for one final question. Mr. Reed, in your professional opinion, was this accident avoidable? Marcus nodded once, his voice calm and certain. Yes. One inspection, 5 minutes of care, would have saved that life. The failure wasn't mechanical. It was human. The words landed like a hammer. There was no need for more. When he stepped down from the stand, the room followed him with their eyes. Some of the jurors nodded, subtle gestures of respect. In the gallery, the same people who had laughed earlier now sat in silence, ashamed of their quick judgments. Judge Whitman cleared his throat, his voice quieter than before. The court thanks Mr. Reed for his testimony. The record will reflect his standing as an expert witness. It wasn't an apology, but the stiffness in his tone betrayed something close to regret. Outside, the courthouse steps were crowded. Reporters tried to push forward, microphones flashing, but Marcus ignored them. What mattered wasn't headlines. It was the truth he had carried with him. The truth no one could laugh away. Waiting near the bottom of the steps were 3 of his apprentices from the garage. Young men in work shirts, their hands still stained from the morning's jobs. They looked at him wide-eyed, proud. Boss, one of them said, we saw the live stream. You showed them. Marcus smiled faintly, shaking his head. I didn't show them anything. The work did. The truth did. Always remember, respect doesn't come from what you wear. It comes from what you know and how you carry it. The apprentices nodded, the lesson sinking deeper than any repair they'd ever done. As Marcus walked away, the courthouse loomed behind him, but it no longer felt like a place where he didn't belong. He had entered as just a mechanic, and left as the man whose words had turned the course of justice. The whispers, the laughter, the dismissal, all of it had been silenced. In their place stood respect, hard-earned, unshakable.